The massive silver ships appeared in Earth's sky on a Tuesday morning, their hulls reflecting sunlight like mirrors as they descended through the clouds. People around the world stopped what they were doing to stare upward, phones buzzing with news alerts and social media posts showing the same impossible sight from different angles. Captain Veltar stood on the bridge of the lead vessel, watching the blue and green planet grow larger through the viewing screen. His purple skin gleamed under the artificial lights as he adjusted the scanning equipment with his 4 arms. To him, this was just another job, another world to harvest before his people stripped it clean of useful resources. "Sir, the biodiversity readings are remarkable," reported his science officer. "This planet has an unusual number of different species living together." Veltar nodded, pleased. The Vortani Empire had been collecting interesting creatures from across the galaxy for thousands of years. They would take the best specimens, display them in their great biopreserves, and then consume everything else the planet had to offer. It was efficient and profitable. Down on Earth, Dr. Kim Juno was collecting water samples from a coral reef near Jeju Island when the ocean around him began to glow with strange blue light. The marine biologist surfaced quickly, pulling off his diving mask to see enormous beams of energy scanning the water. Fish of all sizes were being pulled upward by some invisible force, disappearing into the belly of the ship hovering above. He tried to swim toward shore, but the blue light caught him too. His body felt heavy and strange as he was lifted from the water, unable to move or speak. The last thing he saw before everything went dark was his research boat being pulled up alongside him. In Seoul, Park Hannah was treating an injured stray dog at her veterinary clinic when the walls began to shake. Through her window, she watched as people and animals on the street below froze in place, surrounded by the same blue glow she had seen on the news. The veterinarian tried to run toward the back exit, but her legs would not obey her commands. The aliens were thorough in their collection. Their technology could identify and capture any living thing within a certain area. They took house cats sleeping in sunny windows, guard dog from military bases, dolphins playing in the ocean, and birds flying high in the sky. They collected farm animals, zoo animals, and wild animals without distinction. But they also took humans. To the Vortani, humans were just another interesting species. Their scans showed that humans had larger brains than most creatures on the planet, and they displayed complex emotional behaviors. This made them valuable specimens for their biological museums. The aliens classified humans as semi-intelligent primitives and loaded them into special containment areas alongside the other creatures they found fascinating. Lee Miho was leading a rescue team up Mount Sirac. When the ships found them, the former soldier watched his team members freeze one by one as the blue energy swept across the mountainside. He managed to radio a warning to base camp before the light reached him, but there was nowhere to run. The energy field covered miles in every direction. Thousands of miles away, Kong Sumi was feeding the elephants at Everland Zoo when the same thing happened. The zookeeper had worked with animals her entire life and could read their moods and behaviors better than most people. As she was lifted toward the alien ship, she noticed something the aliens missed. The animals were not just scared. They were watching the humans, waiting for signals, looking for leadership. The Vortani loading process took 3 days. Their ships moved systematically across the planet, their energy beams reaching into every corner of every continent. They collected creatures from deep ocean trenches and high mountain peaks. They took pets from suburban homes and predators from remote jungles. Captain Veltar was particularly pleased with the human specimens. These creatures showed remarkable emotional attachments to other species, often becoming distressed when separated from what the aliens assumed were their food sources. The Vortani found this behavior amusing and primitive. "Look at this one," laughed a guard, pointing at a human who was crying while reaching toward a dog in a nearby containment field. It acts as if the food animal is important. What the aliens did not understand was that these were not random emotional attachments. Humans and their animal companions had evolved together over thousands of years. Dogs had learned to read human facial expressions. Humans had learned to understand animal body language. They were partners, not master and pet. The Vortani also failed to notice that humans were different from every other species they had collected. Other creatures, when captured, either fought briefly and then gave up, or simply waited in fear. Humans did something else entirely. They watched, they learned, they planned. As the alien ships left Earth's atmosphere and jumped into hyperspace, carrying their cargo of Earth's creatures toward the Vortani home system, Captain Veltar felt satisfied with another successful harvest. He had no idea that he had just made the biggest mistake in his species' history. He had not collected Earth's animals. He had kidnapped the planet's apex predator along with all of its allies. The Vortani flagship was like a floating city in space, its corridors stretching for miles in every direction. In the center of the massive ship lay the biopreserve, a vast area filled with transparent containers holding Earth's creatures. Soft lights created an artificial day and night cycle, while climate controls kept each section at the perfect temperature for its inhabitants. Lee Mio pressed his hands against the energy barrier that kept him trapped in his cell. The former soldier could see dozens of other humans scattered throughout the preserve, each one locked in their own transparent prison. Some were crying, others sat in silence, but a few were doing what he was doing, watching and learning. 3 days had passed since they left Earth. In that time, Miho had counted 17 different types of alien guards. He memorized their patrol routes, noted which ones carried weapons, and observed how they operated the control panels that managed the containment fields. The aliens were confident and careless. They treated the preserve like a peaceful zoo, not a prison holding dangerous captives. "Fascinating specimens," said Ambassador Carre as she led a group of Vortani officials through the biopreserve. Her scales shimmered blue and green as she gestured toward the human section. "Notice how they show emotional distress when separated from other species. Most remarkable." The alien dignitaries laughed as they watched Park Hannah press her face against her barrier, reaching toward a German shepherd in the next enclosure. The dog whined and paced, clearly agitated by the separation from its human companion. To the Vortani, this was entertaining proof of how primitive these creatures were. What they did not see was the complex communication happening between human and dog. Hannah was using subtle hand signals she had learned as a veterinarian, calming the animal while also giving it simple commands. The dog's responses told her it was uninjured and ready to act when needed. In the avian section, Choi Deho had been working for hours to get the attention of a large black bird. The former pilot knew that ravens were among the smartest animals on Earth, capable of solving puzzles and using tools. When the bird finally approached his barrier, Deho began tapping patterns against the transparent wall. The raven tilted its head, studying the human's movements. After several minutes, it began tapping back, copying the rhythm. Deho smiled. The bird was learning. More importantly, it was teaching the other ravens in nearby containers to do the same. Yoon Jae-won watched the alien guard with the trained eye of a police officer. She had spent 15 years working with K-9 units and knew how to read both human and animal behavior. The guards were sloppy, talking loudly among themselves as they walked their routes. They never imagined that their primitive prisoners might be listening and learning their language. The guard named Felton particularly amused her. He always stopped at the same spots, always checked the same control panels, and always carried his weapon on his left side. He also had a habit of leaving access doors slightly open behind him. Jae-won filed away every detail for later use. "Look at how they cluster together," observed Science Officer Mordek, pointing at a group of humans who had managed to position themselves close to each other near the barriers. "They seek comfort from their own kind, like herd animals." The aliens saw fearful creatures huddling for emotional support. They missed the fact that former soldiers, police officers, scientists, and animal trainers were organizing themselves into teams. Hand signals, facial expressions, and body language created a silent communication network that grew stronger each day. Kong Sumi had positioned herself where she could see both the human section and several animal enclosures. As a zookeeper, she understood animal behavior better than anyone else on the ship. She watched the dolphins swimming in agitated circles, noted how the big cats paced restlessly, and observed the way the elephants kept trumpeting at regular intervals. The animals were not just scared. They were trying to communicate with each other and with the humans. The dolphins were using their sonar to map the ship's structure. The elephants were calling to animals in other sections. Even the smaller creatures like mice and rats were exploring every corner of their containers, looking for weaknesses. Dr. Kim Juno had been studying the ship's structure through his barrier, using his knowledge of marine engineering to understand how the systems worked. The biopreserve operated like a giant aquarium, with life support systems, filtration, and climate controls all connected through a central network. Everything was automated and controlled by computers. The aliens were proud of their technology, often discussing it openly in front of their prisoners. They assumed the primitive creatures could not understand their language or appreciate the complexity of their systems. They were wrong on both counts. Song Mina, a behavioral psychologist, had been listening carefully to the guards' conversations. She was beginning to understand basic Vortani words and phrases. More importantly, she was learning about their culture and mindset. The aliens saw themselves as superior beings collecting interesting specimens. They had no concept that their prisoners might be planning something. As the ship continued its journey through hyperspace toward the Vortani home system, the aliens prepared for a grand display of their latest collection. They planned to show off Earth's creatures to thousands of visitors, demonstrating the emotional bonds between species as an example of primitive behavior. They had no idea they were about to learn what those bonds really meant when humanity was threatened. The breakthrough came on the fifth day when Yoon Jae-won discovered that the containment barriers had a weakness. The former K-9 handler had been watching the German shepherds and Belgian Malinois in the adjacent enclosures, and she noticed something the aliens had missed. The dogs were responding to her hand signals, even through the energy fields. She started with simple commands: sit, stay, watch. The dogs obeyed instantly, their years of training overriding their fear and confusion. When Guard Felton walked by during his evening patrol, he saw nothing unusual, just a human sitting quietly and some dogs resting peacefully. He did not see the complex communication happening between species that had worked together for thousands of years. Nam Tae-hyun had been tapping rhythms against a cell wall for 3 days, trying to reach the dolphins in the marine section 50 meters away. The wildlife researcher knew that dolphins could hear sounds through water and metal that humans could not detect. When the first dolphin finally responded with its own pattern of clicks, Tae-hyun felt a surge of hope. The dolphins were not just answering him. They were using their natural sonar abilities to map the entire ship. Every wall, every corridor, every hidden passage was being cataloged by creatures whose brains had evolved to create three-dimensional sound pictures of their environment. The information they gathered was more detailed than any blueprint. In the avian section, the ravens had become Choi Daeho's secret agents. The intelligent birds could see things from their elevated perches that humans could not observe from ground level. They watched guard rotations, noted which aliens carried keys, and identified security cameras hidden in the ceiling. When Daeho tapped questions against his barrier, the ravens would tap back answers, creating a communication system that grew more sophisticated each day. Park Juno, the former explosives expert, had been studying the ship's power systems through careful observation. Every time the lights dimmed or the air circulation changed, he made mental notes. The biopreserve's life support was connected to the main power grid, but there were backup systems and emergency protocols. Most importantly, there were manual overrides that could be accessed if someone knew where to look. Base Susie had always been good with animals, but working with the octopi was teaching her new things about intelligence and problem-solving. The 8-armed creatures could manipulate objects with incredible precision, and they seemed to understand that the humans wanted help. When she drew simple diagrams on the condensation inside her barrier, the octopi would study them carefully and then demonstrate that they could perform the tasks she was showing them. The real breakthrough came when Song Mina realized she could understand more of the alien language than she had thought. The Vortani guards talked freely in front of their prisoners, discussing everything from shift schedules to ship operations. They assumed the primitive creatures could not learn their sophisticated language. They were badly mistaken. The feeding systems activate automatically at dawn cycle. Guard Mortek was telling his colleague as they walked past the human section. The barrier is lower for exactly 90 seconds to allow food distribution. Song Mina memorized every word. 90 seconds was not long, but it might be enough if everyone knew exactly what to do. Lee Miho had been organizing the humans into teams based on their skills and backgrounds. Military personnel formed one group, animal experts another, scientists and engineers a third. They communicated through a combination of hand signals, body language, and simple drawings made on the condensation that formed on their barriers. The plan that emerged was unlike anything the aliens could have imagined. Humans did not just think about escaping from their own selves. They thought about coordinating with every other species on the ship, turning the biopreserve into a weapon that would strike at multiple points simultaneously. Khan Sumi had identified which animals would be most useful in different situations. The big cats were powerful but unpredictable. The dogs were loyal and trainable. The dolphins were intelligent scouts. The ravens could access areas too small for larger creatures. Even the mice and rats could serve as messengers, carrying small objects through ventilation systems. But the most important realization came from Dr. Kim Juno, who understood something the aliens did not. Earth's creatures had not evolved in isolation. They had evolved together, learning to read each other's signals, to cooperate, to form partnerships that made them stronger than any individual species could be alone. The aliens saw a collection of different animals from a primitive world. They did not see an ecosystem that had spent millions of years learning to work as one unified force, with humanity as its organizing intelligence. Han Suyang, who had worked as an animal trainer at marine parks, began teaching the other humans how to communicate with species they had never worked with before. Elephant calls meant different things depending on tone and rhythm. Dolphin clicks could convey complex information. Even bird songs had patterns that could be learned and copied. As the ship approached the halfway point to the Vortani home system, the aliens were pleased with how calm their specimens had become. The initial panic and distress had faded, replaced by what appeared to be peaceful acceptance of their situation. They had no idea that peace was the last thing on their prisoners' minds. Earth's apex predator was gathering its allies, and the hunt was about to begin. The rebellion began at exactly 0300 ship time, when Vortani were deep in their rest cycle, and only a skeleton crew remained on duty. Han Suyang had been counting the seconds until the feeding system activated, her heart pounding as she watched the energy barrier around herself flicker and dim. The moment the barrier dropped for its 90-second feeding cycle, she rolled forward and pressed her hand against the manual override panel she had watched guard Felton use dozens of times. Her fingers found the right sequence of buttons, and suddenly every containment field in her section went dark. Chaos erupted throughout the biopreserve as Earth's creatures poured out of their cells. But this was not random panic. This was coordinated warfare unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Lee Miho emerged from his cell, already moving. 3 German shepherds at his side responded to hand signals as if they were still on patrol duty together. The former soldier had memorized every guard post, every security camera, every weak point in the ship's defenses. Now he moved through the corridors like a shadow, his canine partners clearing the way with silent efficiency. The dogs did not bark or howl. They had been trained for stealth operations, and they remembered their training even here among the stars. When Guard Veltar rounded a corner expecting to find empty hallways, he instead found himself facing creatures that attacked with military precision. His screams were cut short before he could sound any alarm. In the marine section, Nam Tae-hyun was already swimming alongside the dolphins as emergency systems flooded their enclosure. The intelligent sea mammals had used their sonar mapping to guide him through underwater passages that led directly to the ship's main power core. Human hands and dolphin intelligence working together made short work of the alien security systems. Above them, the Ravens had become an aerial strike force. Choi Deo watched with satisfaction as the black birds swarmed to the ship's upper levels, their sharp beaks and claws targeting communication arrays and surveillance equipment with surgical precision. The aliens had built their ship to defend against enemy vessels, not against small, intelligent creatures that could fly through air ducts and disable systems from the inside. Yoon Jae-won moved through the ship's corridors with a pack of working dogs that obeyed her every command. Belgian Malinois, German shepherds, and even some mixed breeds that had been police or military animals on Earth. They moved like a coordinated unit, taking down guards before the aliens could react or call for help. The Vortani security systems were designed to handle riots or escapes by individual species. They had protocols for containing aggressive predators or dealing with panic herbivores. But they had never faced an enemy that fought on multiple levels simultaneously, coordinating attacks through a network of interspecies communication that spanned the entire ship. Park Juno had reached the ship's main engineering section, guided by the octopi that had squeezed through maintenance shafts too small for human bodies. The 8-armed creatures operated control panels with their tentacles, while the human engineer used his knowledge of explosives to identify critical systems. Together, they began a systematic shutdown of the ship's defensive capabilities. Captain Veltar was awakened by alarms blaring throughout his vessel. His bridge crew scrambled to understand what was happening, but their sensors showed impossible readings. The biopreserve was in complete chaos, but it was not random chaos. Every attack seemed perfectly timed and coordinated. "Sir, we have lost communications with Deck 7 through 12, reported his tactical officer, fear creeping into his voice. "Security teams are not responding to calls." "How is this possible?" Veltar demanded. "They are primitive creatures in containment cells." He was answered by the lights going out throughout the bridge. Emergency power kicked in moments later, bathing everything in red light. Through the bridge's viewing windows, he could see dark shapes moving through the corridors outside. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4, and still others flew through the air with wings spread wide. Kong Sumi had reached the ship's central computer core with a group of ravens and several trained monkeys that had been captured from various zoos on Earth. The birds could access control panels at any height, while the monkeys' nimble fingers could manipulate complex switches and buttons. Under her direction, they began reprogramming the ship's automated systems. The aliens found themselves trapped by their own technology. Doors that should have opened remained sealed. Weapons that should have fired would not activate. Life support systems began redirecting air and power away from alien quarters toward the areas where Earth's creatures were operating. Dr. Kim Juno had joined forces with Base Susie and her team of octopi in the ship's navigation center. The marine biologist understood enough about spacecraft systems to recognize which controls managed the hyperdrive engines. With the octopi's help, he began shutting down the ship's ability to jump to other star systems. The Vortani were not just being defeated. They were being systematically hunted by creatures that had learned to work together in ways their species had never imagined possible. Every strength the aliens thought they possessed became a weakness when faced with enemies that could adapt, coordinate, and think in 3 dimensions. As the ship's captain watched his vessel fall to beings he had dismissed as primitive specimens, he began to understand the terrible truth. These were not random animals from a backward world. They were Earth's apex predator and all of its allies, working together as they had for thousands of years. The hunt was almost over. Admiral Ko Yerim stood on the bridge that had once belonged to Captain Veltar, her hand steady on the alien control panels as she coordinated the final phase of their operation. The former Navy commander had taken charge after the initial rebellion succeeded, organizing the scattered human survivors into a proper military force. Around her, Earth's creatures moved with purpose through corridors now under their complete control. The Vortani flagship was only the beginning. Through the ship's quantum communication network, Ko Yerim could see the locations of 17 other bioharvesting vessels spread across this sector of space. Each ship carried thousands of creatures stolen from dozens of different worlds. It was time to free them all. "Choi, status report on the communication array," she called to the former pilot, who was working alongside a team of ravens in the upper command center. "Online and ready, Admiral," came his response. "The birds have rewired the entire system. We can reach every ship in the Vortani fleet." Lee Miho appeared on the bridge, flanked by 2 German shepherds, and carrying a Vortani weapon he had learned to operate. His team had finished securing the lower decks, where the remaining alien crew members were now imprisoned in the same cells that had once held Earth's animals. "All sections clear," he reported. "The aliens are contained and their weapons are secured. No casualties among our people or animals." Ko Yerim nodded. The operation had succeeded beyond their wildest hopes. Not a single human or Earth creature had been lost during the takeover. The aliens, for all their advanced technology, had proven surprisingly fragile when faced with coordinated attacks from creatures they did not understand. Dr. Im Hyunwoo, the communication specialist, looked up from his console where he had been working to decode the Vortani language completely. His team included Song Mina, whose psychological insights had helped him understand alien thinking patterns, and several dolphins whose sonar abilities had mapped the ship's entire communication network. "Admiral, I have prepared the message for broadcast," M reported. "We can transmit simultaneously to all known Vortani frequencies, plus any other alien civilizations monitoring their networks." "Send it," Ko Yerim ordered. The message that went out across the galaxy was simple but unmistakable. It was transmitted in 47 different alien languages, ensuring that every spacefaring civilization would understand its meaning. "I am Admiral Ko Yerim of Earth. The creatures you see before you are not specimens for your collections or slaves for your entertainment. We are a unified ecosystem under the protection of humanity. Any species that attempts to harm, capture, or exploit Earth's life forms will face the full response of our planet's apex predator. We do not seek conflict, but we will defend our own with every resource at our disposal." The message was accompanied by tactical data, showing how quickly the humans had captured not just one ship, but the entire Vortani biofleet. In less than 6 hours, 17 advanced alien vessels had fallen to creatures the galaxy had dismissed as primitive animals. Captain Veltar sat in his cell, staring through the energy barrier at the humans who now controlled his ship. He finally understood what his species had missed. These were not random emotional attachments between different creatures. They were military alliances forged over millions of years of evolution. The human female feeding the German shepherd was not showing affection to a pet. She was maintaining readiness with a battle partner. The man communicating with dolphins was not playing with amusing sea creatures. He was coordinating with reconnaissance specialists whose abilities exceeded anything in the Vortani military. Park Juno appeared outside his cell, studying the alien captain with the same clinical interest the Vortani had once shown toward their prisoners. Behind him, an octopus operated a control panel, while ravens perched on overhead pipes, watching everything with intelligent black eyes. "Your species made a fundamental error," Park said in carefully pronounced Vortani words. "You assumed that intelligence and cooperation were weaknesses. You thought emotional bonds made creatures vulnerable." He gestured toward the ship around them, now completely under Earth control. "You were wrong. Humans became the dominant species on our planet, not because we were the strongest or fastest, but because we learned to make allies of every other creature that shared our world. We turned cooperation into our greatest weapon." Veltar watched as a small mouse scurried across the corridor, carrying a message tube, part of a communication network that connected every section of the ship. These creatures had turned his advanced vessel into an extension of their own ecosystem, with each species contributing its unique abilities to the whole. News of the Earth Rebellion spread quickly through galactic communication networks. Other spacefaring civilizations that had considered humanity a minor curiosity suddenly began reassessing their assumptions. Any species that could coordinate multi-level warfare across dozens of different creature types, while captured and imprisoned, was not to be underestimated. As the captured Vortani fleet changed course toward Earth, Ko Yerim stood before the main viewing screen, watching the stars whirl slowly past. Behind her, humans worked alongside dogs, dolphins, ravens, and dozens of other species in perfect harmony. They were no longer prisoners being transported to alien zoos. They were Earth's representatives, returning home to report that their planet was no longer defenseless. The galaxy had learned a new lesson. Earth's creatures were not specimens to be collected. They were partners in the most successful predator alliance in known space, and they had just announced their presence to the universe.